Welcome back to another episode of the African Football Roundup. I'm your host, Maher Mizahi. Before we begin, this is a reminder that, as always, this episode is brought to you by africasaCountry.com. We are officially back from our publishing break at Africa as a Country. So, in the very, very near future, we're going to start publishing a lot of articles. I highly recommend you go and check out the website if you're at all interested in African affairs, whether they be political, social, economic, etc. A reminder, a call to like the videos on YouTube, to subscribe to the YouTube channel, to leave a comment if you can, and to rate us on all audio podcast platforms. On this episode, my co-host for today is Salim Masoud Said. Again, he's returning for a second consecutive week. He is the African football connoisseur, and our guest we will either be speaking to the Cameroonian journalist Giovanni Wanneh as he tells us a little bit about the trouble that's going on in Cameroon. But Salim, welcome back. How's the break been?
Thank you so much, Maher. Good break,
Yeah.
but straight back into it. The international break is obviously one of the highlights of any football calendar. Fans of club football might tell you differently sometimes, but I do feel like it's probably the rawest version of football that's left.
Mm.
So I just like to see all the success stories, all the feel good stories, and all the calamities or disasters that are happening as well in the footballing world in terms of the bigger nations being slayed. So always very, very happy to be observing and seeing what is happening on the continent.
So for this episode, we're gonna sort of adapt a traditional format. Usually we have the good, the bad, and the ugly. This time around, we're gonna go the good, the not so bad, and the ugly. So basically, what I just wanted you to do is to give me three observations. We're gonna start with the good. You're gonna give me your good, and then I'm gonna talk about my good. Then we'll go over to our Cameroonian journalist Giovanni, and then when we come back from the break, we'll do the not so bads and the uglies. So Salim, from the matches that you watched, from the football that you saw, what would you say is something that caught your eye and you're like, that's really good.
Uh, guess it's like a continuation of what we saw at the Africa Cup of Nations, where Cote d'Ivoire won the main continental piece. And I think Emerse Fae really impressed during that tournament in terms of the tweaks he made during the games. When the game was kind of getting away from Cote d'Ivoire, he would always do something that would have a massive effect. We saw it in the quarterfinals against Mali, I think when he brought on Umar Diakite and Simon Adingra. We saw it in the second round as well, I think against Senegal, where he brought on Frank Kessié to score the penalty in the end. And then we saw it also in the semi-finals as well with the tweaks he made that game in that game. So in terms of Halle and whatnot. So we saw his real, you know, I guess his real, I would say, ability or capability to make those changes. And we saw it again during this international break, actually, when in the first round of matches, where he brought on Jean-Phillipe Grasso and Benny Traore, and they had a massive impact as the game was 0-0 against Zambia. Jean-Phillipe Grasso scoring a brace, and then Benny Traore just being really lively, having kind of a really good impact in those 20 or so minutes he had in the game. And you're always looking for these kind of players who can kind of come on and make a great impact. So he did that. And it's just showing, I think, Emerse Fae's ability to know what the game needs at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the knockout stages, they were behind against Senegal very early on. They were behind against Mali, and the changes that he makes ends up winning them the matches every single time. Just a quick touch on Emerse Fae. I thought the Ivorian Federation were in a very tricky place because you have a coach that wins you the Afcon. You can't fire him really, right? But at the same time, he's very inexperienced. So what do you do? So I like the fact that they gave him the extension. They put their faith in him. But from what I'm hearing, the contract is also very incentive laden. So he basically he's getting paid very well, but he has to hit certain marks to continue going with the Ivorians. Your thoughts on that?
No, again, it was one of those changes nobody thought would happen, really. I remember that Max Gradel saying they went on to win because they had a second life, right? They had already died, so they had nothing to lose in the group stages. After what was an awful group stage, then they just, thanks to I think Morocco, they ended up getting through. But this mentality that they ended up having a second life and succeeding through like a very probably irrational appointment in a way. Like, he was completely inexperienced out of nowhere. And I was reading a really interesting article yesterday actually around what is the real impact of coaches here? Are they any good or are they any bad? And the author was talking about the hardest thing in football is choosing the right coach at the right time. You can put Guardiola in a certain environment, he will struggle at a certain time. He doesn't have the players, but making sure that you're selecting the right coach at the right time. I don't know who made that call and what logic they had at the Ivorian Federation, but whoever did generally did. I'm guessing he knew, or they knew that the Emerse Fae had this capability to do something different. And wow, what a result! What a couple of months for them.
It could have just been an exceptional, coming together of circumstances because I think it was confirmed that they did reach out to Hervé Renard after Jean-Louis Gasset was fired, and Renard said, I can't like disengage myself from the Olympic women's national team, the French national team, and so they maybe had nobody else except for Emerse Fae, but then he goes out and he earns it, right? But anyways, I'm going to talk about my good, and for me, it's Ibrahim Adel and the Egyptian national team. So I think for the longest period of time, we talked about that 2017 Afcon last time and the ugly final between Cameroon and Egypt. But I think for the longest period of time, we had seen an Egyptian side that played ugly in the sense where they were very good at eliminating any half spaces between the lines, usually played with experienced goalkeepers and defenders, had strategies for how to save penalties and penalty shootouts, knew how to grind out results, especially in the knockout stages. And they made it to two finals in 2017 and 2021. But I think there was always people were admitting that there's a little bit of a separation. It seems like the team is sort of bifurcated in half. You have the defense and the midfield, and then you have the attacking line, especially Mohamed Salah, and he could at times be isolated. Even if he can conjure a little bit of magic, he can be isolated. And going into this last AFCON just 8 months ago, I think the logic out of Egypt was that, with the inclusion of Imam Ashur, with the inclusion of Marwan Atiyah, maybe these are more ball-playing midfielders that are going to be able to make things more fluid in terms of carrying the team forward, bringing the ball into attack, ball progressing midfielders.
Yeah,
Imam Ashur, I mean, you talk about, the
what a
classic
player.
trope
Yeah,
of, Egyptian players not having the right professional mentality. I mean, he's injured in the AFCON because he tries to do a somersault in training and falls on his neck. Coming to life. And then just a few weeks ago or a few months ago, he goes to a mall and attacks a security guard on video camera, him and with like 20 friends of his. And so he's in legal trouble for that as well. He had a lot of promise. He got the move to Europe, 3 million euros, I believe, or $3 million is a big move in Egypt. And he just hasn't, in my opinion, he had a good year at the Champions League last season with Al Ahly. They did a good job there.
yeah, he was
I
very
don't
good.
know if
Yeah,
he's the right player. I don't know if he's reliable enough with the Egyptian national team. And so for me, the fact that I first heard about Ibrahim Adil at the under 23 AFCON, where I believe he was voted best player, I believe. It was either him or
yeah,
Azabde. I believe it was him. Egypt make it to the final and they make it to the Olympics. I didn't really watch him too much at the AFCON, but I watched him at the Olympics. And in Algeria, we have this saying, somebody reeks of football. Like when you have so much football in you that it seeps out of your pores. That's for me, like technically, I love this player. He usually plays on the wing, on the left or the right wing, and he's really good at receiving the ball and cutting in, usually, especially because he's usually on the left wing. So he'll cut in on his right foot and he'll play these long diagonal passes. He'll play through balls. He'll play little 1-2s and progress the ball up the pitch. And I really think that he's still very young, but I really think that he could be the solution hopefully in
yeah,
the near future, because I don't know how many years Mohamed Salah has at the very, very top level, but I think he could be the solution, linking that midfield, the Egyptian midfield and the Egyptian attack. And the fact that he came on and scored a goal 2 days ago against Cape Verde in their first match of the AFCON qualifiers, I think is a very, very good sign.
yeah,
He did have a
yeah.
move, I think this summer was supposed to go to Getafe, but it fell through at the very last moment. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to Europe in the very near future. Do you have any thoughts on Ibrahim Adil or Egypt in general?
I mean, Egypt in general, I was going to ask you, when you see that attacking line, are there better attacking lines in Africa than Marmoush, Salah?
So
and
good.
Mustafa Mohammed.
Yeah,
Like it's like all the ingredients are there. You know, you have three. You have Mustafa Mohammed who's very good in the air. Kind of is a classic number nine, right? The classic number nine. I love his aggression, the way he attacks the ball. So you have Salah needs no introduction. And then you've got Marmoush, and just I saw the game against Cape Verde and the way they fly forward. You know, when they're flying forward on those counter attacks, it's almost like they just need to get it sorted. You know, Hassan needs to get things sorted behind them, and then they've got all the attacking artillery to do whatever they want to do.
absolutely. I mean, Omar Marmoush is a player that has progressed, I think, so well. Initially, I thought he was like a little bit more of a winger, but in the Bundesliga, he's been scoring so many goals, playing as a sort of makeshift striker at times. I really, really have admired his improvement and his progression over the last year or two with Eintracht Frankfurt. Let's move on to our interview of this week. We spoke to Cameroonian journalist Giovanni Wanneh. Because Cameroonian football is kind of in a mess. The players came to the country. 15 of them go to a hotel in Yaoundé where the Ministry of Sport wants them to be camped out. Eight of them go to Douala, where Samuel Eto'o wants them to go, but they're intercepted by security forces and they're turned back to Yaoundé. The Ministry of Sport also wants to play the match in Yaoundé. Samuel Eto'o had already asked for the match to be played in Garoua in the north of the country, and eventually the Ministry of Sport um, capitulates and agrees to play the match in Garoua. Samuel Eto'o is going to call up some under 20 players and some local players to replace the national team and have them play. I believe they're playing against Namibia in that match in Garoua. And so it's just a big mess, and it's this ongoing war between the Ministry of Sport and FECAFOOT, the Cameroonian Federation. So let's hear what Giovanni had to say. Welcome to another episode of the African Football Roundup. It's nice to speak to you again. You've been on this channel before, speaking about Samuel Eto'o, speaking about Cameroon FA, speaking about the MINSEP, the Ministry of Sport in your country. I'm coming back your way because it seems like from the outside there's been, another mess with the Cameroonian national team. It seems like at the beginning of the international break, a group of players went to a hotel that was designated by the Ministry of Sport. Another group were going to go to a hotel that was supposedly designated by Eto'o. Those ones were intercepted and brought back. These are all reports that I'm reading, so you're going to have to confirm or deny. Those ones were intercepted, brought back to the ministry hotel. And then there was a fight about if they should play this match in Garoua or Yaoundé. In the end, they ended up playing in Garoua because the FA had already committed to that. And I think CAF and television and so on and so forth. And I even heard, I read at least, that Samuel Eto'o was going to call up, players from the under 20 level or local players to sort of replace the team who had, I guess, betrayed him in a sense. What can you tell me about what's been going on over the last 2 to 3 days in Cameroon, please?
Yeah, hello, Maher. First of all, it's been a mess for some of us who follow and love local football. It's not been just 2 or 3 days; it's been months now from the World Cup qualifiers games that we played. The last FIFA window, it was this way, but it didn't aggravate to this level, and very few people knew, probably foresaw that it was going to get to this level. And the level at which it has gotten now is just an absolute mess. It's an embarrassment to not just Cameroon football, but to our country as well. Because if you followed the game yesterday keenly, I mean, I was in Garoua. So you notice that we did not start the game on time because the national anthem even began to play when the players were still in the tunnel. So lots of petty spats here and there. The MINSEP, the Ministry of Sports and Physical Education, appointed staff backed by the government, and the Federation appointed staff backed by the Federation and its boss, Samuel Eto'o, insisted that they needed to have the players' passports, and they were only going to accredit those who they deemed necessary or those who have been appointed by the Federation to be seated on the bench. So that's why Anunga, the assistant coach of Mark Brace, wasn't on the bench. Immediately after the national anthem, he was ushered out of that place. And Mark Brace had to sit and then communicate with people he has not worked with since he came to Cameroon. You know, how weird is that? So he had to work with Idris Carlos Kameni, Martin Tongo Pile, and David Pagu. Not necessarily working with them. He just had to, from time to time exchange with them
So
to
to
see
confirm,
the substitutions.
sorry to cut you off. To confirm, You're telling me that Mark Brice, the coach of Cameroon, he has his own staff that was appointed by the Ministry of Sport that he brought. But here, for
Yeah,
this match, Cameroon versus Namibia, it was the federation that accredited the assistant coaches and the staff, and they have their own staff that they wanted to give to the coach, and he had to work with the federation's staff.
absolutely. And it was even more embarrassing because during the training, the pre-match training warm up, Idris Carlos Kameni was the one training Tanzania Onana. So I don't know as much detail that he gave Onana, but Onana has been working with Alium Boka. You should know him. He won the Afcon successively in 2000 and 2002. He's been the one working with Andrew Onana, but before the game, because the federation has a loan rights to, accreditate and works with the Confederation of African Football, Kamini was accredited, so he was the only one given the license to enter the field and then work with Andrew Onana. Now, coming back to the story, of course, you briefed the audience before we are about kickstarting. It's true that 2 hotels were booked, one by Mr. Benjamin Titi Banlo, the general coordinator appointed by the minister and the Ministry of Sports and Physical Education, and the other, Bena Angwa, who is former Indomitable Lion, appointed by the Federation, of course. The Federation decided that the Lions were going to be lodged in Douala. Initially, the game was supposed to be played in Japoma, Douala, but the argument the Onis gave, that's the body will have in charge of infrastructure in Cameroon, taking care of the stadium across National Triangle. Onis said that field was not going to be ready, and it was raining a lot in Douala, so they weren't going to be able to give that field out to the Federation. So the Federation had, booked hotels, and then even the flight itineraries. Players had 2 flight itineraries, one from Benjamin Titi Banlock from the ministry, and the other from Benangwa. So all of this, I'm quite surprised that those players won, by the way, 1-0. Credit to them, they put out a great show, but I'm pretty sure that afterwards most of them could retire.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't blame the players if some next international breaks, maybe some of them fake an injury or maybe find an excuse not to come and play, especially if Cameroon start wrapping up the qualification. Can you give me a brief analysis of what you saw in Garoua, of the match itself? Cameroon 1-0 against Namibia. Vincent Aboubakar scores in his hometown. That must have been a nice moment for him too. He scores the only goal of the match. Can you just give me a brief analysis, maybe in 2-3 minutes, of what the game was like and what you saw? Carlos Baleba, how was
Yeah.
he? He's one of the players I'm most excited
Oh,
about.
he's quite a talent. And Vincent Abubakar is the closest to Eto's numbers in the national team as we speak right now. I think he's just 9 goals behind Samuel Eto'o, who ended his career on 56. So I think if he keeps up with the national team form, he is one day going to break that record. Records are meant to be broken. Well, entirely, I think Mark Brice has had a pass mark. He's played 3 games so far. The next is going to be against Zimbabwe. The Lions, as we speak, are already in Kampala. There's a whole new episode about hotels and every other thing there, but I'll just keep that aside
Yeah,
to
please
talk
spare
about the
us.
game proper.
Talk about football.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the starting 11, first of all, the thing we're noticing with Mark Brice that wasn't with Coach Rigobert's song is that he's trying to get some continuity in his team. We can quite clearly see that before a game, if there are certain players who are not injured, then you can see that, okay, Mark Brice is going to line up so and so player in this position because there's a clear identity of how he wants to play. He repeated his starting 11 like 90% in the last 3 games. He started with Wo and Michael Nganding-Gadri, who made his way back to the national team. Andrew Nana, of course, between the sticks. On the right back position, there's Jackson Chachua, who was absolutely amazing yesterday, one of my contenders of player of the match as well. And in the left back position, Nuhu Tolu, who left injured yesterday, by the way. But we are hoping that he comes back from injury real quick. And then in the middle of the park, there's Carlos Baleba, Zambo Anguissa, and then Martin Hongla, who have played all the games so far for Mark Brice. So you can quite clearly see that there's an identity, there's something he wants to bring out from these players. And then up front, there's Brian Burmo, Christian Basova, who has really been performing well for Mark Brice down the left side because he was almost forgotten for the national team. he wasn't the favorite in that position for Rigobert Song-Bahana, but he's found himself back in that position, and he's contesting with Georges Kevin Kudu, who was one of our best players in Cote d'Ivoire. In fact, our best player in Cote d'Ivoire. He's contesting the same position with him, and he's getting the nod from Mark Brice, and then Vincent Abubakar starting in the center forward position. First off, Colin Benjamin and the Brave Warriors of Namibia picked up 4 points from 6. That's what many people do not know. In the last 2 encounters that we had, in the last Afcon 2 encounters that we had, we shared the spoils against them in Yaoundé 1-1. Olivier Kemen even scored an equalizer after Peter Shalulili has scored the opener. So we came back from 1 down to equal that. And then in South Africa, where they received us, we got the lashing from them. Absolutely no worries or absolutely no complaints about that. They outplayed us on the day. So this game was sort of a game to redeem our pride, People have lost that fear factor in Cameroon. When you come to Cameroon, it's just another team you want to play against. No, we are trying to bring back that fear factor. And to me, the identity of Brice's game is keeping ball possession, and he has the players who can do it. Probably the reason why he has played Carlos Baleba all through the 3 games, because he has an identity, he has a way he wants to start his football. He starts from the back with Andrew Nana with the ball, playing goalkeeper, to Carlos Baleba, who plays that deep line midfield role, and then leaves Anguissa the free role to do as he wishes in that almost number 10 position. Anguissa is not demanded to work as hard as he would have been doing without Baleba being by his side. And then Martin Hongla just sitting in there with Baleba. So we dominated the ball possession. We in the first half, we didn't create as much chances. In the first half, Carlos Baleba's long-range shot was the only, stardust in all that. But in the second segment, we really came to the fore. We came to the party. I think Basoko would have gotten a goal for himself. After the goal Vincent Abubakar scored, he had a 1v1 saved. He would have gotten a brace on the day. But then talk about the goal. It all started from Carlos Baleba once more, who was unanimously voted the player of the game. It's a long through ball that Brian Bimo was calling for it, as he has done for Brentford all through the season, or at the start of the season rather, where he scored 3 goals for them. He timed his run to perfection, beat the offside trap, got the ball, and the Namibian defense were flat-footed. They thought the flag was going to be raised by the assistant. It wasn't raised. Brian Bimo's shot was eventually saved. And then Abubakar, in the real poacher's sense, following up the ball to an empty net. So beating the goalkeeper to score that solitary goal. So I really do think that the players did their best, given the circumstances under which the game was played. And mind you that in Garoua, the Rumbia Jazz Stadium, it wasn't the best turf. Yeah. We have better in Cameroon than what you saw on the screens yesterday. Possibly the reason why Onis was saying that the game should be played in Yaoundé. So, given all of that and the stress that the players went through, it's a massive result. I think Namibia on their path, no shame about losing to Cameroon 1-0. They came in, and despite Colin Benjamin saying that at the end of the game that he thought that his team was superior and the official was not having his best day, I think they really put a good account of themselves. They're a team to watch out for. They qualified for the last Afcon in Cote d'Ivoire. And they lost their games through minor details that they would have went on to qualify from the group stage. I personally think, because I watched most of their games. So they're on a good footing, and we still have a game against them out of Cameroon. So who knows, if they come on with the kind of tactical organization and spirit which they did yesterday, because they played low block, compact. They made us work much more harder than we thought it would have worked. If they can put up a show out of Cameroon like that in probably South Africa, then I think maybe they could just run away with the draw. It's quite a competitive group, by the way, because Zimbabwe. Yeah, it's quite a competitive group, by the way, because Zimbabwe and Kenya will be hoping to make the Afcon. Of course, Kenya missed out. The last time they played was in 2019, but Zimbabwe missed out because of the FIFA ban that they had. They weren't reinstated in time. Then mind you that Zimbabwe had played the 2019 tournament and the 2021 tournament here in Cameroon. So they know all they need to know about the country, and they are regulars in the competition. They are trying to find their way back into the competition. So it's quite a tricky group, and all what we just needed to do was win because Kenya shared the spoils with Zimbabwe, so it was an excellent result for us altogether.
Gio, I only have 1 minute left. So in 1 minute, what is the solution? How does Cameroon get out of this crisis between the ministry and the federation president, this ego battle? In 1 minute or less, how does it happen?
Sincerely, Maher, I don't see that happening. Either the Minister of Sports will throw in the towel or the Federation throws in the towel because the level at which two parties have gone, it's I don't think it's amendable. It's they have overstretched their bounds and people feel hurt. People with a bloated ego feel their ego has been messed with. So given the circumstances and everything that happened here in Cameroon, precisely Garwa yesterday, I don't think there's any mending of relationship. We're just going to leave one party, will just leave it for the other party to go on with it. And yeah, possibly that's all right there.
So there's
The prime
no,
minister tried, yeah, the
yes,
prime
it doesn't look
minister
like there's
tried
any. Yeah, go on, go on.
yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to be fixed anytime soon. The prime minister tried talking some sense to the players, but he only has his limits too, because truly the federation communicates with CAF and FIFA, the government doesn't. So, yeah, so it's quite a sad situation. And even in Kampala, Uganda, right now, I tell you, there's lots of troubles. So, they're not to bother the viewers.
Unfortunately, we don't have the time to get into all of that. So it does seem like there's no chance of coexistence, that one side is going to have to overcome the other. Gio, thank you again for coming on to speak to me on the African Football Roundup. I'm sure we'll be checking in sometime soon again because it doesn't seem like the controversy in Cameroon is going away anytime soon. Gio, thank you, and we'll speak soon. So Salim, what do you make of what's going on in Cameroon at the moment? And how, I mean, even with that way, Mark Brice, I believe he won his first match 4-1, a few months back. They still managed to find ways to win matches. I mean, but what do you make of this instability with that federation level?
Well, it's just, I mean, the Cameroon Federation is not known for its stability so much, but I think what this does highlight is a non-alignment between the federation, the government, and the federation's president. Of course, like it seems everybody just wants to be the one calling the shots. I completely understand why, because the government gets involved in a situation like this where the coach does need that stability in terms of knowing his salary is coming in on time, and whatnot. And I think actually even coaches, foreign coaches, they're actually very lured. They're very allured by a job if they know they have that stability where
Yes.
the government is taking care of the payments instead of federations who are not generating enough money on a day-to-day basis. So it's just, I think, very sad to see the lack of alignment, because for me, Cameroon is a country with great potential. They're one of Africa's great teams, so much history. I think when you mention African football, Cameroon 1990, Cameroon 1982, with Benjamin Messing's great tackles come to mind. So it's just a shame to see that they're wasting so much time squabbling at administration level
Yeah.
when there's so much potential in that country. And I just hope they do, they can sit down and resolve all these issues that they're having at the moment.
Yeah. And we'll see if those squabbles find their way onto the field and if they end up dropping points. So Salim, let's move on to, we did the good already. We're not going to do the bad. We're going to do the not so bad. What is your not so bad player moment of the week, team of the week?
Yes, the not so bad player or moment of the week or team of the week. I would say Morocco. So Morocco had, I would say, two very different halves in the game against Gabon. In the first half, where the game was essentially over after 30 minutes, after two Hakim Ziyech penalties were converted. But I would say there was also probably a lack of balance in how they were set up. Amrabat was having too much to do in this kind of 4-1 system that they were playing. And then kind of the second half, they came out and you could see they were far more balanced, far better balanced in terms of how they were playing. And I think we saw the Morocco that was more the Morocco we saw at the World Cup. So Ayoub El Kabi notched up a goal as well. But I think we just saw that Morocco are still finding themselves, and Regragui is finding some solutions. I think that was a much needed morale boosting victory. But probably tactically very important, because I think if they were playing the way they were playing in the first half, kind of very loose in midfield with so much to exploit when they lose the ball, then there are going to be issues for them in the coming weeks and months, and at the Afcon next year too. So it's interesting. That's an interesting one. I think I said in the last episode that that's one to keep an eye on. I think that victory was very important for Regragui and the team in terms of building that confidence. Now it's a matter of, can they keep up that kind of intensity when they're pressing, link up play when they're having it in the final third. And I think even at the back, there's the great issue of having two very good / world class fullbacks in Mazraoui and Hakimi, who plays on the left, who plays on the right. So I think Regragui is still finding solutions to that. It's a great problem to have, but as I said in the last episode, it's about him making sure the dish that he cooks up is one that the Moroccan people want to eat.
And they really still have so much time before the AFCON rolls around. That was a very important win against Gabon. They have Lesotho at home as well, because of Lesotho doesn't have a stadium that's been approved by CAF. So I don't think they're well, they're not in danger anyways because they're hosting. But I really do think they have the time, they have the players. It's all about, as you mentioned, now the technique of cooking it up and presenting the right plate. From one North African country to the other, just across their eastern border. Also, a game of two halves for Algeria against Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea, by the way, they always push Algeria. They always give them a tough match. If you remember, they're the ones that broke Algeria's 35-match unbeaten streak at the 2021 AFCON. That Ibn Salvador, who he picked a fight with like 4 or 5 players again. That guy is a menace in the pitch.
He's a menace.
Yeah, but
Absolute menace.
He's a player you'd love to have on your team, but he's just very gritty, annoying, tough, but good player. But Algeria in the first half, it looked like the Algeria of the last 2, 3 years, which is why I was so pessimistic. They do this build-up play where they're passing it along the back line, advance it into a defensive midfielder who brings it back along it's very horizontal. It takes sometimes 30 seconds to move into the opponent's pitch. It's not vertical at all. Um, the wingers are not tracking back. They're not closing down. Very little pressing. They're not winning their duels. And by the end of the first half, they win, by the way, a penalty, a soft penalty, but maybe it was a penalty. And Riyad Mahrez skies it over the crossbar. So remember, this is Mahrez's first match under the new coach, Vladimir Petkovic. He comes back as the captain and he misses a penalty in the 30th minute or so. And so at halftime, I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking, okay, how many clear occasions did we create? And Algeria had created 2, maybe 3. And Equatorial Guinea had created 3 or 4, even though Algeria had the lion's share of possession. And so this was very much the Algeria that we're trying to shed and get rid of. The one that we've been stuck in this for a very long time.
But Equatorial Guinea, yes, they're quite
good
at kind
yeah,
of like they're very technically. I think you can get in the habit of easily underrating them or underestimating them. But I think teams struggle so much with them because they largely play in Spain, right? They play Spain and they play that Spanish style of if you give them the ball, it might be a while.
Yeah, no, it would definitely be a while before you get it back, and they're very good at pressing, and they're good in the final thirds of each pitch of each side of the pitch as well. But in the second half, I don't know what was said, but Algeria came out with their hair on fire. I think they heard some of the boos at halftime, and within the first 5 minutes, we're creating 3, 4 occasions at a time, and that's the Algeria that I was looking for. And it came from Riyad Mahrez. It came from players like Ismail Ben Nasser, Hussam Aouar, Baghdad Bounedjah. These are the players that you wanted to come from, the leaders of the team. And so I thought that was encouraging. And they end up scoring a goal via Hussam Aouar, but it really came through Riyad Mahrez cutting across the pitch, 30 yards, getting a solid shot on goal. There was a rebound, and Awad headed the ball back in. So that was great to see. And then in the end, substitutes put the nail in the coffin with a 2-0 victory. So very, very important victory for Algeria. Got the 3 points under their belt, and now they travel to Liberia. So that's a difficult trip, very difficult trip. But you should still try and get 3 points there against the Liberian side. That's should be a lot less talented than Algeria, but it wasn't so bad. Just because the first half was poor and the second half was much better, I'm gonna put it in my not so bad category. Should we move on, or anything to say about Algeria?
No, nothing else to say. Just to say that they're not so bad. Bit of this, Sergio Leone is not going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so let's talk about the ugly. There was a lot of ugly on the continent over the last few days. What would you say was the ugliest moment or the ugliest team or the ugliest player that you watched over the last few days?
Probably not the ugliest team, ugliest player. I can't say that as a Tanzanian, but I was really, really disappointed with the turnout for the match that we played against Ethiopia, which ended in a 1-1 draw against Ethiopia. I was just very disappointed with the turnout in that match. If you consider that when Simba or Young Africans play their games in the CAF Champions League or Confederations Cup, you do see a massive turnout. The home field advantage that we have for our club levels is one of the reasons that we've been so successful, relatively speaking, on the continent recently, and we don't quite get that same, I would say, passion or turnout for the national team. See, part of that is fans want something to shout about, but at the same time, I think players also need that support. So it's a delicate balance. I think Tanzanian people are quite disillusioned with the national team as it is, and it's almost like, okay, if you win games, then we'll come and see you. But then the players are like, well, to win games, we need your support. So it's a very interesting
for the worst, actually.
of our home field advantage, and it meant we walked away with the 1-1 draw.
Yeah, you have to capitalize on that home field advantage, especially when you can get as raucous crowds as you can in Tanzania, as you mentioned, for the club sides. And it's something that I hope to see improve probably, heading into especially 2027. I really want to see Tanzania or Kenya or Uganda go far in one of those countries go far in that tournament. Um, my ugly was the Ghanaian Black Stars losing 1-0 at home to Angola. And just as we spoke about, Algeria and Equatorial Guinea being an underrated side that I think people, tend to downplay. We could say the same thing about Angola. We saw them in the quarterfinals of the Afcon. They have the players, they have the coach Pedro Gonçalves, who's been with, their younger generations for many, many years now. And so this is taking nothing away from Angola. But for Ghana to lose 1-0 in Kumasi, Kumasi, for those that don't know, this is it's the heart of Asante Kotoko. This is deep when you talk about like a real atmosphere. Kumasi is a real atmosphere. This is the most passionate sets of supporters in Ghana. They, I believe, haven't lost a match in Kumasi in close to nearly 3 decades. Um, and so for them to lose 1-0 at home and then to exacerbate matters, there was crowd violence at the end of the match, people throwing stuff on the pitch invaders. And the state of the pitch itself was apparently pockmarked. People were saying it felt like a potato patch. And I forget, I read a quote. I don't remember if it was an analyst or an administrator or maybe somebody that worked in the stadium that said, "Oh, and were the Angolan players playing in the sky?" For me, that's the wrong attitude to have, It's the wrong attitude to have. Like, yes, I get your point. We still should have won the match, but it's very important for Ghana, especially if you're looking to take the game to Angola, at home. They need to have a good pitch because that's going to help them, attack. Whereas I think if you have a
Yeah.
pop march pick like that, it helps the team defend. But for them saying that were the Angolan players playing in the sky, I thought was very funny. Very funny, but I think that was a real ugly. And Ghana, it seems like they're stagnating, right? Because it seems like they're in between generations. The Ayew brothers, Jordan is still being called up. Dede hasn't been called up for the last two. You have some aging players, but you also like Partey, um,
Yeah, yeah,
losing
yeah.
losing my train of thought.
It's quite,
Iñaki Williams is getting older, but at the same time, you have these right to dream academy graduates. Ibrahim Osman signed to Brighton, is now in I believe he's on loan now. You have Kamaldeen Sulemana. You have again, I'm losing my train of thought now, but
kudos.
Kudus, of course. You have so many very interesting. Fatawu Issahaku is not right to dream, but another very young, talented player at Leicester City. And I thought Otto Addo would be the right person maybe to oversee this transition because he's used to working with young players, right? Obviously at Dortmund, he was talent manager sort of, and he worked with players like Erling Haaland, and he understands that
Yeah.
mentality. But it was a tough loss for them to lose 1-0 at
Yeah,
home.
and he's been in the system for quite a while, so he wasn't kind of being thrown straight into the into deep end. He was very much already in the system, understands the pressure, understands the player, understands the environment. But I think he's gone on the toughest job in Africa.
Why?
I think it
Ghana?
is.
Why do you think it is?
Well, it's between Ghana and Morocco, but I do feel with Ghana, they haven't had a feel good story for a long time. 2010 is 2010.
And it's heartbreaking.
But again, 2010, even then it's heartbreaking. That's 14 years ago now we're talking about. So with all the disappointments in the recent Afcons, the early exits in some recent Afcons, actually, and given Ghana, where their players play, like I looked at the lineup, you got Thomas Partey, Mohamed Kudus. It's not.
Majida Shimiru is really good in midfield. They have real talent. Real talent.
They have real
Alexander
talent.
Djiku is one of the best defenders in Africa, in my opinion.
Yeah. So it's quite unthinkable when you think about it, and you're looking at that lineup. You're saying, how the hell can they lose 1-0 at home to Angola? So yeah, let's see how that one turns out. But not a great start to their qualification phase.
It's an interesting question about what's the toughest job in Africa. We might do an episode just on that. I immediately thought of, we spoke about Cameroon on this episode. That could be a very tough one just because of the instability and the egos. And then I think about Nigeria sometimes as well. And, the media pressure that you can get, being the coach of Nigeria must be very, very
South
difficult.
Africa.
There's a lot of South African viewers and fans of this podcast, but they know that sometimes they overrate their importance in African football. They think they're more there.
Tanzanians, we can be accused of that too.
Yeah. And North Africans.
Yeah,
maybe
it's tough in its own way.
Anyways, we're going to wrap up this episode of the African Football Roundup. Salim, thank you for joining me again as co-host for another episode. We hope that you're enjoying the international break so far. Every team has played at least one match by the time this episode comes out on YouTube and on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on and so forth. So you still have time to, if you haven't been watching matches, to catch up with the international break and watch every team's second match. Again, if you do like what you listen to, please don't hesitate to subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, enjoy the rest of the matches, and we'll be back after the international break. So we're doing these once a week, but we're going to do another episode midweek just to recap the international break, because immediately after the international break, we have the CAF Champions League, CAF Confederation Cup. So we're going to do a midweek one where we're going to be speaking to, hopefully, the Central African Republic Coach Raoul Savoy, about Central African Republic's push to qualify to the African Cup of Nations for the first time in their history. So I think that's going to be really interesting and one to keep an eye on. So we'll see you really just in 2-3 days. Thanks for listening again, and we hope to speak soon. Peace.